Welcome to the Human Resource Committee for Thursday, September 18th. First on the agenda is call to order. Second is public comments. Do we have any public comments? Had one last time. We could double up today. Nobody? All right. Moving on is discussion and possible action on employee wage study. And you have the floor. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Very bright. Coordinated. Thank you.
Yes, we're going with the pastels.
Yes.
All right. Good morning. We've already had a couple of meetings on the wage study, talking about how it's being done and an update. And the report is complete now. And we have the consultant with us here today to present it to you. This is Michael Misrahi with Evergreen Consultants.
Thank you so much.
Michael, welcome. This is Mike and Jake. I'm John. It's good to meet you.
all. And I appreciate you guys having me on the agenda today and being able to speak to you all in person. What I want to touch on with you guys is an overview of kind of what were the findings and recommendations that came out of the study. I know some of this you may have heard, but so I apologize if any of this is reiteration, but I want to make sure we take you through all of it from the top to the end. So with that, the overall goal of the wage study was to conduct a market analysis. So the market analysis is that piece where we reach out to peer organizations.
Microphone a little closer. Yeah, that'd be
There we
good.
go. Is that better?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so. Thank you.
So with the market analysis, the goal of that is, of course, to benchmark what is your compensation rates and practices versus your peers right now for the set of classifications, essentially. The end goal being identifying what's your overall competitive position as it relates to compensation, as well as a few additional items such as public safety certification, pay, and incentives as well as part of that comparison process. From there, then we developed recommendations as it relates to your overall compensation structure, specific pay grades, and how they aligned with how peers are setting pay rates for similar positions, as well as administrative practices for maintaining the system moving forward. And then lastly, of course, we've been working with HR on developing an implementation process of actually, if you were to adopt these changes, what would that look like? What would be the budgetary impact? And how could you do so? And what would be the best way to do so moving forward? With that, as far as the overall the methodology of the survey, it focused on the ranges offered by peer organizations for similar positions. So the practice that we use when benchmarking is we've attained all of your current job descriptions at the onset of the study, so we could understand what is the type of work actually being done here at the town, and found comparable work at your peer organizations by looking through their descriptions. We know we don't do a strict job title comparison. We know job titles are simply just that, and you could put whatever title you want on any particular role. We want to make sure we're looking at what are the actual duties and requirements that go along with roles for us to consider it an overlapping match, essentially. We looked at 72 full-time positions as part of this process. It's what we call benchmarking, where we get a good representative sampling of the various jobs that are here at the town right now. This allows us to make sure that we're covering all the major job families and levels within the organization, so that when we say, this is what your overall structure is, we've got a good extrapolation point to say this is how competitive the overall structure is. The peer group that we looked at was one that was defined by the town. So our understanding is a historical peer group you guys have used now for a few studies. And it's a small tailored group to specific comparisons that you guys have here in the local market as well. And it's not just municipalities. It does extend to the county. It does extend to Goose Creek Fire District. It looks at some, again, very pertinent peers for you all, not just on the general staff side, but as well as on the public safety side. In addition to that, we also, as part of our standard methodology, we used a cost of living adjustment for the peers as well. So what this does is it looks at the regional cost of living for each of the organizations, and it compares that against the cost of living you guys have here in Charleston County. And so for those, everybody within the counties, essentially, they would have the same cost of living because this is done at a county level. And then anybody outside, Goose Creek being an example, we would adjust for their compensation because they're at a different cost of living index. The indexes that you'll see in the final report are based on a 100-point average. So 100 points is a national average cost of living organization. Anything above 100 is higher than the national average. Anything below 100 is below. It's fairly straightforward. And all of this is pulled from the Center for Economic Regional Competitiveness. They're one of the main providers for cost of living data to the federal government. We just purchased their data before it gets published for the general public. As far as the results of the market survey go, everything is represented as average against the market average. And we looked at the beginning points, the middle points, and the end points of the pay ranges themselves. This is a structural approach of looking at compensation rather than focusing on individual pay in comparison, average individual pay, because individual pay is, it basically be based on a lot of individual factors or variables that can't be controlled for how long individuals have been with the organization, their performance, what they negotiated, things that you can't really apples to apples across organizations. But the ranges of compensation, that structural nature, that doesn't have any of those variables attached to it. So with that, again, as mentioned, not all positions receive sufficient response. We typically look for having a match count of 5 positions from organizations for us to consider it a reliable response. It's what's considered best practice in our field. Anything less than that would be considered an unreliable average. We have reported on that in the report, but we're not making recommendations on anything that received less than 5 appropriate matches from peers. So as I mentioned, we did that job description comparison, and comparing the duties. That's what we use to ascertain, is this an appropriate match? And not every single organization contains the exact same job type at that same level. And that's a key part of it. They may have somebody in that area performing that work, but that may not be at the appropriate level to compare against you all. Lastly, what is the overall takeaway as far as the market survey results? We found that at the minimum of your ranges right now across those that smaller peer group, we found that right now the town, on average, across the benchmark classifications, lags the market by about 9.5%, 9.4 to be specific. At the midpoint of the range, that reduces down to about 8.9%, and at the maximum of the ranges, it's about 4.2%. That you're lagging the market. The reason why you see such a difference between the minimum and the maximum really relates to the fact that your pay range is a little bit wider than your peers on average. It's not for every classification that this is true. It means that essentially, the design of your structure is such that, the difference between minimum and maximum is just a little bit broader than what your peers are doing. And so as a result, if I was an employee here at the town, again, this is speaking on average, I would start off almost 10% behind the market at the minimum range, but by the time I got to the maximum, I'd be closer to about 4% behind market. So I gained some market ground the further I progress in the range, essentially. That's what it tells us. That being said, the minimum and the midpoint tend to be the most important anchor points to consider when assessing compensation, because the minimum is that starting point for most employees, especially if they don't have a lot of experience. They're typically starting closer to those minimum of the ranges, and most employees don't start beyond the midpoint of the range when they're first starting with the organization. And most employees don't typically have a salary that progresses too far behind the midpoint, beyond the midpoint of the range in local government as well. That's not a common thing to see. The maximum is really intended to be the end point of the range of this is the most we would want to pay for this position.
Mr. Rambo?
Quick, just kind of check for understanding. So with the minimum, midpoint, maximum, are you talking about in a specific job title, or a specific like a sergeant or a lieutenant, or are you talking about minimum as in a starting police officer versus maximum being the chief of police?
That's a great point of clarification. So if you think about the police officer example, we'd be looking at what's the minimum you pay for a police officer versus the maximum you pay for a police officer, and we assess that against what's the minimum your peers pay for minimum for an officer versus a maximum for an officer. So all within that same classification.
With the same job classification.
Exactly.
And
then we aggregated
the same title but the same duties, so to speak.
Exactly. So, officer, that's one where we're not going to see variability in how they're titled. But if we talk about, an administrative assistant, that could be called administrative specialist, technician, a variety of different things. We want to make sure we're matching to the job duties that are actually done here under that title at the town. And so we take that average by job, and then we looked at, how do you compare against that job at the minimum, midpoint, and maximum across the range, across your peers, and averaging that together, that's what these 3 bullet points represent. What's that average position that you have overall within your compensation structure across these 72 jobs?
Did you find that that we matched up with ranks and job titles pretty easily, or was there a broader range with other municipalities, if that makes sense? I can only compare to what I do. We've got cook 1, cook 2, cook 3. A lot of people just have a cook.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people just hire a cook.
No,
So
that's
did you find a lot of, was that comparison very
it was actually it's a great
close?
question. I would say you guys had a higher overlap than we typically see, in a good way. Of you are aligning your that'd be the classification side of things, so your title system and all of that, and how you group jobs together. I would say right now you guys have fairly similar classification structures to your peers. You guys have a fairly small peer group in general. Sometimes we do these studies, we look at, double the amount of peers. It's not uncommon. And we would see match counts only a little bit higher when we have twice as many peers to draw on. You guys had really good match count for how small and specific your peer group is, which speaks to they're very comparable operationally and how as well as how they've classification structured themselves as well. So we found that no, you guys, or yes, ultimately you guys do compare very well to those peers from their classification systems.
Great. Go ahead, Mr. Tinky.
If you look at it, following on that same example, if you take an entry level, a police officer, a firefighter, and there's, let's say there's a various number of people that in each of these departments that are doing the comparative with, and you look at their tenure. In other words, how many people have been there 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and 5 years, and how many have had cost of living increases, et cetera, over that time, then is it logical to assume that if you had a lot of people that were new on the force versus people that were heavily tenured, it would skew lower? And so then did you look at the composition of those different job classifications from a tenure standpoint?
Council member, that's a great question. So because we're focusing on the ranges, we're not skewed by actual outcomes like their distribution of tenure, essentially,
Right.
because we're focused on what's the minimum pay they offer for an officer, as their starting point and their end point. That basically allows that to be a non-factor. But if you were asking about from the town side, that's a really good question. So if we said most of the town's officers are newer right now, then more of them would be closer to that 9.4%. Again, in average, that's not officers in general. They'd be closer to that number versus if you told me all of our officers have been here 30 years, I'd expect them to be closer to that 4.2 because they'd be further in the range. And that's trying to true up structure with individuals.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And one question then kind of leading off that is, do you look at and do you recommend on how we do our wage increases, if there is to be a wage increase every year, being merit-based or cost of living increase? Do you look at that and do you make recommendations on what other peers are doing in your report?
We do have a recommendation on that, actually.
Excellent.
I can jump ahead, or if you want to wait till it comes up towards the end.
Yeah, we'll wait. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And as you I want to thank the staff for continuing to provide this type of information over the years. As I've watched it when I wasn't on council, y'all have been continuous about looking for improvement. So thank you for doing that. Thank you, Evergreen, for coming today. When you're looking at compensation, I want to congratulate the town for having a wonderful wellness day yesterday. It was fabulous, and there was a real benefit to everybody. I learned some things. I'm doing DNA testing now. But when you're looking at this, are you looking at total compensation, meaning the health and welfare wellness benefits, because those are significant? It goes total compensation. I know when I get my paycheck, I really just focus on that. So I get that. But I also have to pay bills. So does it have that a component in there as well?
So in this study, we did not look at the full benefits suite. So we did not compare your full benefits package across your peers. Now, I will say we are looking only at public sector peers. By and large, they're largely going to have a similar package. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't going to be nuances. We didn't look at it. I don't know for sure everything they offer versus what you offer. But we do benefit studies tied with compensation all the time across the country, including in your guys' market. We tend to, the variance you would see across governments is pretty small. There are some things, and it comes down to, hey, we actually offer the holidays tend to be a wash. The time off tends to be a wash. A lot of retirements tend to be state retirements, or they may not be that different. Where it really comes down to is some supplemental benefits that some may offer and others don't. It's usually what is offered as opposed to the value of the offering. In most cases, it tends to be different from government to government. But I can, and unequivocally, we did not look at that in this process. This was focused on base pay. Where we did look at from a benefit side was on again, not in all benefits, but on specialty pay and certification pay and things like that, non-base pay items was for public safety. We did look at some of those items, but again, I want to be clear, we did not look at total compensation and including benefits in this process.
Okay.
For everything you're seeing on the slide, that's a base pay comparison.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions before I jump to the next slide? Okay. The next piece I want to talk on is, again, getting to the results a little bit deeper. So part of the, those bullet points in on the previous slide were everything in the aggregate, your overall structure findings. But essentially, every position had its own condition, essentially. So like, as we mentioned, if we looked at officer in this process, officer would have had its own rate of comparison versus administrative assistant would have had its own rate of comparison versus the peers. There were some positions that were competitive with market or closer to market, above the average. Some were below, and some were further below, essentially. So we prioritized our recommendations on identifying what are those classifications that are the furthest below market average right now. We believe, a triage approach, essentially. Those that are closer, within a couple percentage points or even above, that's not a priority, typically speaking. You want to focus on those that are significantly below. That's where you're going to be more vulnerable to recruitment and retention challenges. And so we identified there were about 12 positions that were more than 15% off, either at the minimum, the midpoint, or the maximum. So they were behind somewhere in the range by more than 15%. There was about a dozen or so positions in that. Ultimately, we recommended 30 classifications would change grade. Part of that, obviously, it stems from the 12 positions being below 15%, and it has a cascading effect. So it's related jobs that need to move from an internal equity aspect. So, again, I'll use the example. If we had recommended officer to move, well, then you have to be cognizant of what does that do to sergeants. You have to jobs that are highly related or within series. This was mostly concentrated from the general staff side in the inspectors and the IT group. Those were the two areas that this was the most impacted or the furthest behind market that we're seeing as a trend. In addition to that, the other group that we saw a trend in was certain upper management jobs as well. We found that by and large, upper management positions were further behind market than some of the frontline staff. We believe in discussions with the town, this may be just because of prioritization over the years on focusing on entry-level positions, that this may have been something that could have, this was not a focus in past studies potentially. But we do think it's important that these be considered. Obviously, if these are the jobs that are furthest behind market, it becomes especially really important, even if you're not thinking about current incumbents, but looking future succession planning purposes. These are the ranges that you're going to use to go out and recruit. If you were to turn over these positions, or if they were to naturally term out, if folks were to retire, you want to think about these are the ranges you'll use to recruit. So we're talking about the ranges again, not individual pay. And then, of course, if you're trying to retain the staff too, it would be important to impact this group, especially if it has been a group that has not been emphasized in past studies potentially. The last grouping I would say for those that we've recommended pay grade assignments to are just individual one-off positions that just happen to be behind market, that aren't related to anything else. Some of them are single incumbent, some of them are small incumbent positions, but we didn't single them out here just because some of them are single incumbent positions. With that, the question becomes, we've made pay grade recommendations. If you were to adopt them, what does that do to the individual then? So we're talking about changing the range. How do we then impact the incumbents within that classification to make sure you don't have any issues now that you've moved the range? What we've recommended you use is a method called compa ratio or comparative ratio. It's a big term in our world, but probably not one you would hear very commonly outside of that. My wife's never heard of it. Compa ratio essentially is the idea of what is my salary's relation to the midpoint of the range? And so my current midpoint of the range is the idea of salary progression, measuring my progression versus the midpoint of the range. And the reason why it anchors to the midpoint is because that's intended to represent market average salaries, essentially. This is the market average range. The minimum should be the average salary, in the aggregate. That should be the goal. It's also intended to represent full competency. Employees that are at the midpoint of the range should be fully competent in their job by that point. And a fully competent employee ideally would be near the midpoint of the range. And everything else left would be just remaining career, essentially. That's why it's such an important comparison point. So what this method does is it looks at what is my current percentage of midpoint that I make right now. So if I make exact my midpoint, that percentage would be 100%. If I make a little bit below, it might be 95%. If I make a little bit above, it might be 105% of the midpoint. That's the ratio number itself. We take that and apply it to the new range. So if we've moved the range by 5%, the employee moves up roughly by 5%. because they'd be keeping pace with where that midpoint has moved essentially. And what that does is it ensures that you don't create any issues by adjusting the range. One thing that I can tell you a lot of organizations will do is they'll go through this process and they'll say, okay, we'll move the ranges. But if they don't move the incumbents as well, you can end up creating issues at home because you've bumped up the salary floor, but you've not realigned the folks that were in that range against that floor. It's something we see occur a lot when organizations choose to implement, a living wage, or they have to react to minimum wage standards that happen. We see it occur again a lot in studies. When I was a compensation manager at the University of Central Florida, we did that exact approach, and it created a lot of morale issues because folks compressed against the bottom point of the range. It creates what we call salary compression, and it can create a lot of morale issues if you've got a lot of folks bunched together in salary who have very different levels of experience. They would view it as, this isn't fair. I've been here so much longer than this person. So comp ratio maintains the hierarchy you've already developed. It doesn't change it in any way. It prevents the creation of that salary compression from occurring because everybody's relationship to midpoint gets preserved. You transition the hierarchy you have now, you keep that same hierarchy in the new ranges, essentially just moving for the market conditions. So that's why we think this is particularly important for you guys, because you're really just making market adjustments on a grade basis. So it would be ensuring you're not changing anything else about the distribution of pay within the range, except carrying it forward into a more market competitive range.
Are you seeing with the pandemic and all that, a wage war started? Everybody trying to outbid everybody, and I experienced that as well. Is that calming down? I mean, you got one municipality raises, and then another has to raise it, and raise it, and it's an endless thing. Is it calming down?
I would say it has absolutely calmed down the last year and a half or so. So the phenomenon really was post-COVID. Everyone, people got sent home. There's a lot of layoffs and all that. The feeling was at the end of the world. There was huge reductions and rifts that were happening. But what ended up happening was it wasn't the end of the world. People got rehired, but they found that the secret got out that when I started a new organization, I can negotiate my pay. And it turns out I might have been given a hometown discount where I was. And so with such what I call the great reshuffling, everybody reshuffled employees, everybody negotiated pay again. Everybody got better starting points, essentially. And that created this cascading effect of people realized jumping employers is the most effective way to advance your compensation in the shortest time period. And so we saw a lot of that, and there was cascading effects. Of course, that was private sector driven mostly, but everything bleeds over to the public sector eventually. And so I can tell you from our standpoint, we had a lot of studies that were done following this effect in 2022 and 2023. It's really dropped off a lot in the last year, though. We're seeing much more specialized surveys, or folks that are doing routine maintenance now. We're not seeing as many reactionary surveys as we did in that period. We're seeing more the usual ebb and flow.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, the next piece I wanted to touch on was the public safety side of things. So again, while of course we looked at the compensation as well, we also looked at their incentives. So we did a deeper dive on what were the incentive pays offered currently here right now at the town versus your peers. And overall, we found by and large, your educational incentives, while you do offer some, are at a fraction of what your peers are doing. So most of your peers are offering education incentives for associates up through masters. Some even offer doctoral ones as well. But the amounts that they're giving are substantially higher than what you're affording for the incentives you guys have right now. In some cases, double, triple. Some of them have set percentages, so that grows with their salary. So if they move further up, their incentive will grow with it. One peer gives 7% for each educational level. That grows with their salary, essentially, rather than being even a flat amount. So what it means is there's just a huge gap in what you're offering right now versus what the peers are on higher education incentives. That does extend into certifications and specialized training, and as a result, some assignment pay that goes along with that too. Everything from hazmat to SWAT teams to training officers. I mean, there's a variety of things we looked at, and we found not every peer is necessarily doing everything, but a lot of them are doing at least a few more things than you're doing right now, and have some pay assigned to that. And so as a result, we're recommending that you explore looking into adopting some of those. We're also recommending that on the education education incentives, that those just be up to meet a little bit closer to what your peers are doing. Again, because some of them are doing flat rate and percentage is not an exact number to say this puts you right at the average, because that number is variable. But we're looking at flat rate incentives that we think would be appropriate for you all. We've made recommendations on those amounts, and then again, just a more general recommendation that you should explore, and obviously as the departments find what are the most valuable assignment pays or certifications or specialized trainings that they could leverage, those be things explored, and you offering compensation for those. And obviously, always trying to find what's the ones that have the most value return for the town, of course. In addition to that, we are recommending a couple of structural or pay grade changes in this area as well. One of which relates to I will tell you, a nationwide problem that we see in almost every jurisdiction, which is not enough spacing between the non-exempt and exempt ranks within each of the structures. This occurs a lot. And a lot of it comes down to increased overtime hours that exist out there. So as a result, when I'm at still an overtime eligible rank, and I'm going to promote into the non-eligible overtime rank, think sergeant to lieutenant in the police case, I may be giving up a lot of pay in my mind because overtime pay goes away, and I'm accepting these higher level duties and responsibilities and liability that goes along with this. So as a result, a lot of departments find, and this is not unique to the town, this is something I see all over the country, find them having a hard time incentivizing people to want to continue to promote up the structure past the sergeant level, in the case of fire, or up to the battalion chief level in the case of policing in the case of fire, because of that feeling of loss and compensation, and as well as stepping into those additional duties. So we're recommending that there be some increased spacing there, and to incentivize that promotion and make sure folks don't feel like there's a loss in pay, essentially.
Were you privy to that information on how much overtime we give, just out in your study, or
no, that was just brought up as a concern, which again,
Okay.
that is, it's a concern we hear almost every jurisdiction. I hear it to some degree. It's just a matter of to what degree it's a problem. And it's either organizations that are still tackling that or ones that have had to tackle it recently. So it's something we have to ask that question every time we talk to a chief somewhere.
Oh, thank you.
And then the other item related to your community service officers. So right now you've got two different types of community service officers that make the same pay regardless of their duties. So some are administrative in nature and some are field in nature. There's a recommendation to basically separate those out, given that there's a true difference of duties, and not treat them as one and the same, essentially. So that's more of an internal equity issue that was identified. This next piece, this chart just gets into kind of your most immediate peers that we know you've got concerns about. First on fire, looking at Goose Creek Fire, as well as St. John's, giving you an idea of what is the pay they offer tied in with those educational incentives, versus the town of right now and what your education incentives are. So you can see there's a gap in a large part because of those incentives. Part of it is base pay. But it is the incentives are a huge driver in these differences, essentially. And continuing on with the same theme, we do have the same information for police as well.
How many peers did you look at in this study, just so I know? Is it Goose Creek? I mean, how many?
So let me pull back
Yeah,
up
5
again.
or 6, right?
So we've got 6 general peers as well as 2 fire districts were included.
Okay. And then what determined that you don't bring them all up on this, just out of curiosity? They're not all on here, right? All the peers.
These were just our understanding that these are the most immediate peers that you guys feel that you guys have had issues with recruitment and retention against. So the report gets into the overall general information. These were some highlighted comparisons. That and talking with administration that we thought these would be helpful for you to see, because these were some of the biggest concern areas, essentially the biggest gaps that would remain, essentially, or especially if you didn't do the educational incentives.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely. Here, this just gets into total cost of impact of the recommendation. So what would be the wage increases by police and fire and then general employees? And then what would be potential incentive costs as well for each group, as well as the total impact.
And this is uniquely police and fire, not some of the other 72 of the 72 that you looked at?
The town is on the far
The
right
town
here, so
far
that's
right.
that's grouped
So
in
this
here.
is the total amount for all the different
Correct.
positions.
That bottom at the number is the total amount for all the recommendations that we've talked about. Yes.
Okay.
So that's got the police, the fire, as you know, for their wages and incentives, as well as the town wage proposed increases.
Perfect. So whether it's the IT or what
Yep.
or public works, et cetera.
Yep. That in the
Okay.
bottom number, it folds everything in. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. And then lastly, this is just a summary of all the recommendations. I've kind of covered this point. So everything in the first bullet 1 and A, B, and C there, that is all everything we've touched on already. The number 2 I have not. So this is those administrative or maintenance recommendations. So you asked about what would we recommend occur to the overall structure. That's where we've got this folded in. So there's a few things that we've recommended here, and the report, of course, goes into more detail. We've proposed a structured approach to hiring, guideline renovations, essentially. So remodeling how you do hiring salaries to make sure you're more competitive and build in a little bit more flexibility on the system as well. And basically, it would scale. So depending on what level of classification you have in the organization, the more frontline staff, you would again, you could offer some flexibility in starting pay, but there'd be a little bit more rigidity to that, given your frontline staff you tend to not start them further in the range. Those are more entry level roles in nature. You tend to start them more towards the entry. Then, as you scale up in the organization, when you get to more middle management, professional level classifications, you would allow for a little bit more flexibility, hiring closer to the midpoint potentially. And then, when we're talking about hiring director level or executive level positions, you would go purely a market pricing approach, essentially. And again, there's more details on what those guidelines look like written out in the report. There's a whole page on all of that. In addition to that, we do have a section in there as well that gets into recommendations for salary progression. We talk about it in 3 terms. What should you do? How should you maintain moving the structure? How should you maintain or realign individual pay grade classifications like we did in this process? And then lastly, individualized, what would individual incumbent level increases look like, from a merit or cost of living adjustment, and how should you potentially tie that to things like CPI? It gets into all of that as well. We did find that because of the overall gap, so we talked about, we've done the triage in this process. We've targeted those classifications that are furthest behind market. However, there's still a general gap right now. Even if you were to make those adjustments, you'd still be a bit behind market average in the aggregate. And so we do have a recommendation in there that if the town was able to, we think moving the structure overall, all pay ranges by 6% would close that gap. We understand that's not necessarily a small number or maybe not feasible right off the bat. So we have included that as, that would be a secondary priority to doing this triaging first, address those that are furthest off market. But if you were able to, move your structure in the upcoming cycle, we would recommend 6% be that number so that you gain ground on your peers, essentially. If you were to do something closer to, say, a 2 to 3%, that would be keeping you more in line with what the general movement on local government has been the last few years.
Mr. Tiki?
In looking through the materials, and we're looking at different incentives, et cetera, did you find any unique incentives? There's 2 questions here. One, I think I heard you allude to the cost of housing and comparing Mount Pleasant to other areas, the average cost of housing or whatever the stat is. So that's one I'd be interested in. And then 2, were there any unique incentives that related to housing and the cost of housing and how that factors into your pay?
So we didn't see any, we didn't ask peers about incentives like that because that'd be more, again, in that benefits vein. So we didn't get into those questions. And the cost of living index that I refer to, it does include housing. So it's comprehensive though. So it looks into everything from gas to a gallon of milk to a carton of eggs to, what does it cost me to get a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment, to rental insurance, all those types of things are built into that. If you have more curiosity, kind of what goes on the index, I'd be happy to provide you a full breakdown from the organization. But it does weight all those factors. So all of those things are looked at. So cost of housing would have been as part of that adjustment.
The follow-up question, how did Mount Pleasant compare?
So when we looked at the cost of living indexes, it is done at the county level. So you guys would be at this. So it's done for all Charleston County. So they don't have it broken down to the town's level versus the greater county. So you guys, but we did find, I think you're at about a 107, I believe. Yeah.
We don't have.
You guys are at
some more slides.
107.4 right now. And so the national average is 100. So you guys are about 7.4%, 7.4 above the national average cost of living right now. Now keep in mind, that's the entire country is national average. So you guys sit a little bit above the national average in cost of living, about 7.5% above.
Last follow-up question. and we're granular here, so we're comparing against Goose Creek, comparing against Charleston County, comparing to the others. How does it compare? About I know you did it. I heard your answer. You did it for Charleston County, but then is there a comparison in our immediate areas? Because when people go to shop, that's what they do.
Yeah, so we did look at your peers as well. Thank you so much. Let me have that. I want to steal that real fast. Most of your peers all fell with, some of your peers obviously fall within Charleston County, so they have the same index. Some of the other ones that were different, so Columbia's at a 101 right now, so they're a little bit lower cost of living. Goose Creek Fire is at 98.3. They're actually under the national average. Greenville is at 102.6, so again a little bit lower than you all, about 5% lower. The other notable one would be Rock Hill is about 100.8, so they're pretty much right at national average. So there are some differences in your peers in cost of living that is accounted for in this data that we've adjusted for.
So if we're having people travel from Somerville, Goose Creek, all these different areas, and they're below, that's something to at least look at.
That's something to keep in mind as well. Yeah, of course. But obviously there could be a deep dive into your commuting patterns here and understanding where does your workforce have to work? Can they afford to work here versus do they have to live in other areas? That's always something most organizations have to answer for themselves is, do we want to afford the salaries for them to be able to potentially live in our region versus we're okay with them living in the broader community, or do we want them to be able to afford to live and work in the town? I mean, that's absolutely a consideration.
So you're stating on here on B1 and 2 that you feel we should increase the base salary then on those positions, lieutenant and battalion chiefs. I know the chiefs are here as well. They can get up at any time if you guys have anything to add, please. So we're not having a problem. We're not having a problem bringing new employees in. We're having a problem keeping them once they get educated and our pay is not matching the municipalities around us with that education level is the biggest issue we're facing.
Correct. Our pay at the base level is very competitive, and we have not had problems recruiting recently. But where we see it is as they go up in tenure, the gap widens between what we pay and what our competitors pay. So we're losing people after those first few years.
So do we know what that number is on where we lose people? We don't know that, like years of service. I mean, we're losing like between 5 and 7 years or something. Yeah.
Say 3 to 5.
Right.
They might be able to speak to it for their department more specifically, but it's right around that.
Okay. Thank you.
And we did this survey, and what was the recent year that we did the survey?
The last one was completed in 2021.
And we did adjustments at that time, is my understanding.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
The last two items I want to touch on, we had some general recommendations for maintenance related to promotion rates, demotion, transfers, people over the maximum. Again, things that are more maintenance recommendations for HR's purposes on here's things to keep in mind for the system moving forward. And then lastly, we are making a recommendation that if you guys can, to explore looking at expanding HR capacity to maintain this system. You guys are getting to the size now that having a dedicated compensation and classification analyst would really benefit the town, or generalists that could also, part-time work on that component. We think that would be helpful. You guys are at that size where and the employee count and the fact that you've got the public safety side, which has its own specialized challenges. Having somebody assist with that, we think would be beneficial to the town as well. But again, that's a general recommendation for maintenance for the town's consideration.
Or an HRIS that does it all.
Possible as well.
Like Paylocity.
A data-driven person would not be a bad thing, and it allows you to get more proactive.
Thank you for that moment to mention that.
Okay. And that was everything I had. Any other questions I can answer?
Yeah. Just give us a minute to think. There's a lot of data. You're very, very spunky. Got a lot of energy.
Mr. Chairman, can you please scroll back? I think right. Oh, sorry. Next. Well, the previous one.
This is the fire.
This is fire, but I was curious. So there was Goose Creek Fire, St. John's Fire. I don't know who's number one in our region. I guess probably City of Charleston. Do we have the data on what?
These are the highest.
These are the highest in
These
fire.
are the highest paying ones in fire. Yes.
Okay.
It is actually the districts in this case. Yeah.
So, even with this recommendation, if I'm reading this correctly, like a firefighter with a bachelor's degree is still lagging behind Goose Creek by $5,000 a year.
There would still be a gap between you and the market leaders, yes.
Okay.
But keep in mind, again, we did look at more than just these two peers. So we think it would keep you in line with the average. And so
Yeah, but do we want to be average?
that's a philosophical question for the town. I
don't.
can tell you what it would
I'm
take
not
to
a
be
fan
at
of
a certain
average.
place, but that's a great question for the town to answer. You know,
Okay,
where do
can
you
you go to
want
the next
to be?
slide, please?
Yeah, sure.
So the city of Charleston, they're number one in police officer pay. Is that in the region?
Yep.
Okay. So again, a police officer with a bachelor's degree with this, what we're proposing to do is still lagging behind by $6,600, if my math is right. And I'm just want to make sure I'm reading it correctly.
There would still be a gap, correct?
Okay. Did we run any numbers with what it would take to, at the very least, match these top earners for fire and police?
We have not, but that is something we could do.
So we.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Come on up. Come on up, Tammy.
Oh, okay.
Started looking at this.
We need multiple podiums for today. You might have to give up your mic, Eric.
That's okay.
That's
Need
okay.
multiple people.
Yes, to get us to match St. John's on the fire side, it would cost approximately $3.1 million. To get us to match Charleston on the police side would be an additional $3 million.
That's in addition. That's in addition to this
the
recommendation.
1.5 that's in the study, correct?
I'm glad I was sitting down for that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
You said 3.1 for fire,
And 3.
and 3
0.0,
for police, correct?
3 even.
Now, do we take things into consideration? I mean, that's where total comp comes in.
Right.
That's where culture comes in as well. And people wanting to work here, and what that value add is, and that's a tough number to calculate.
Is that police, fire in town, or just police and fire?
That's just looking at police and fire to get us to match the top ones that are on these two slides.
So in order to be consistent, you talked about wage compression and other areas. That would be, peer pressure as far as the other positions in the town. What would it be to bring these others up to the level that you've been considering?
Likely another 25%.
Another 25%. Okay. Thank you.
I do have an important question. I think, Jake, you're on the same lines with me as well with the two chiefs, if they want to get up or not get up on this. But it's also about staffing, and I think council did a great job and staff did a great job in 2021, and now we're doing the annual reviews and merit is involved with that. I don't think that was. I think we went years without anything, right? Almost 5.
You mean with the lean years?
Yeah.
You mean COVID?
Yeah, and all that.
Well,
I mean,
thanks to council, we always did something. The leanest year, there was still a little bonus, even when wages couldn't be increased. There was
Okay.
always something. And as things got better, the compensation got better.
okay. Thank you. And then I think, yes, but my question is, while we're doing this, do we have enough staff? I mean, I look at and maybe there's some things you can and can't say to, out here with public safety, but it's a matter of, while we're doing this, should we ensure that if we have 170 officers, do we need 200? Is it 2 per 1,000? And I think that this is the time that we discuss that and we make sure that we look at the public safety of Mount Pleasant for the next 5 and 10 years, and not just this one blip moment in time, that we also take that into consideration. So I would think that that's a big part.
And Mr. Chairman, I could start that answer, and I know with
Okay.
the chiefs could follow up on that. The numbers we have are based on the level of service that we provide. And so if council believes that we need to increase our level of service in the field, then that would obviously require more firefighters and police officers. it would take some time for Chief Mixon and Chief Arnold to go back and determine what those numbers would be. Council would have to articulate what level of service. If you wanted another patrol district, if you want another fire company, right? Then we would know what to solve for. I believe we have somewhere in slides, if you want to see it, we reduced or produced, I should say, the cost of an individual first year firefighter or police officer, if you'd like to see that, to give you at least a number for one, and then you could multiply it later if you wanted to.
We would love to see that, I believe, and I think that's exactly probably the direction. Obviously, I'm not fire and I'm not in police, but what does it look like over the next 5 years adding a firehouse and adding another district to Mount Pleasant? Because we're such a linear town, it's not easy to navigate, and we want to make sure that public safety is number one, and our citizens need to shore things up. I did an article, we got to lock our doors would be nice, and not leave our guns and wallets in our cars with our door unlocked. It makes it very difficult for the chief of police to have to handle those type of calls. And so we've got to harden up as citizens, but we're a pretty good soft target right now. You just blip over the bridge here, open a car door, grab some things, and see you later. But we need to make sure public safety is number one. And in these times, I really personally want to look out for fire and police on that. So we need to give you, I understand what you're saying with level of service, but we also need to know what level of service you need to make sure not only you match what we think on council we want the level of service to be, but what the level of service needs to be in the town of Mount Pleasant to keep our citizens safe. So you guys are welcome to get up at any point. Go ahead, come on up. Thank you. These gentlemen might have some questions as well. I know, Mr. Tinky, you have something as well. You want to go now or you want to?
No, you go ahead.
Okay.
So, I love Mike Mixon. I love the fire department. They've got something called an FPA manual. It tells them how many firefighters they need to fight a fire at this structure, this height. That doesn't exist in the law enforcement world. You ask me how many officers we need, and it boils down to how does the community feel? Does the community feel safe? What I will tell you is that we are currently at about 1.7 officers per 1,000 citizens. That is below the average when you're talking about that as a metrics to determine how many staff you have. Charleston City's 2.8-ish officers per 1,000 citizens. I'm happy. We periodically, as part of accreditation, do workload studies. We're going to begin a new one, and happy to look at that, publish all of those different data points. How long does it take to respond to a call for service? How many calls for service per officer? Recently, I calculated that, and we are very high. In fact, per officer, we handle more calls for service than Charleston City does. But it's not an exact formula. So I can make recommendations after some study about what I believe we need for the number of officers, and happy to do that. But if you look at me right now and say, Mark, do you need 15 or 20 officers? I don't want to say that, because part of my equation also includes the right combination of civilian and sworn personnel. We have some sworn personnel doing jobs that could be done by a civilian. But simply reclassifying that then doesn't work. You have to add the civilian position in order to allow that officer then to be redeployed in an enforcement mechanism. So short answer is I'm happy to do the research. I'm happy to provide you with something, and let you know where we currently stand and what I believe we need to be at.
Chief Arnold, you talked about the ratios and how you did that before in our conversations. One thing I always like to listen to is what the customer's saying, and that's what I think we're all saying. And so are we having a groundswell that we're saying we're having poor response, we're getting poor service, we're inadequate as far as our attention to the needs of our customers? And how does that compare to what you've seen over your 30 years? Because you've been there 30 years.
I have. And
That'd
so
be helpful.
This department's always had a fantastic relationship with the community and a high level of community support. Every year, we survey citizens on their thoughts about us and our performance. And during those surveys, there's an open comment forum section. Now, as you might imagine, because we send surveys to people we arrest, victims, witnesses, everybody. So it's an interesting mix of comments. But I will tell you, I have seen an increase in comments of a request to see more officers in general, but more officers in neighborhoods patrolling, things like that. And I'm happy to give you that as well, for you all to review that.
That'd be helpful.
Thank you.
Are you comfortable with this study, with the results of this study?
Yes. I am.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
As presented here today, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. Yeah, so a lot of our future plan is laid out in our 5-year strat plan that came out in April. And y'all have allowed us to begin taking steps on top of that strat plan. The Bowman Road Fire Station, which, as you know now, only holds a squad, a 2-person medical response and some medical overlay. The expansion of that station will allow us to put fire suppression in that district, District 7. That Bowman Road area is increasingly busy. Our call volume is increasing. We'll probably eclipse 15,000 calls as a jurisdiction this year, where just a few years back we were under 10,000. So with that first piece of Fire Station 7, that'll allow for expansion of not only apparatus but personnel. And then in this year's budget, you've allowed us to go ahead and purchase an engine, anticipating that when that station is done, we'll have the capacity to roll that in there. So we've begun some of those steps, and there's some other steps in the strat plan that we've laid out over the next 5 years to expand our service level and our capability. But I think that's that first piece that y'all have already kind of put in place.
So if I'm understanding you right, the town, as they put their budget together, was listening to what your needs were. That's been passed in our budget that started July 1, and they're being implemented at this point in time. So you're not seeing an immediate need or a need that can't be resolved as we go incrementally each year to solve some of those issues.
Yes, sir. So yeah, the Station 7 is fully funded. We're at a point now where we're close to beginning groundbreaking, probably the first of the year. Again, the new engine, an additional engine is being added into the budget, is being purchased in anticipation of getting that into that station when it's built. Now, with that comes staffing. We haven't addressed that piece yet to actually staff that engine. But yes, sir, in our strat plan, we're beginning to work some of those things out that were approved in April.
And because of the time it takes to receive new engines, there's some that have been ordered that are still in the process of
That's
coming.
correct. We have several, as you know, and historically it was 12 to 18 months to get a fire apparatus. Post-COVID, we're still seeing 4 and 5 year lead times from the date of purchase. So y'all have allowed us to roll some of those purchases back. We still have several trucks in the pipeline. Our next one's going to be here in 26, but beyond that, we have another 5 engines that are on order right now. So yes, they're working through that process now.
So you have 5 engines on order. The town has responded to your needs, and we've ordered them. We're getting them as fast as we can. In fact, we've tried to accelerate getting them.
That's right. We've kind of rolled back some of those purchase times. We're reducing the time that we're actually in a frontline engine, where it used to be 12 to 15 years. With the level of call volume, we've seen that they're just not lasting as long. Clearly, the wear and tear, the frequency with which they're going out on response, we're reducing the time that they're in that as a frontline apparatus as well to try to combat it from both sides.
And are you comfortable with the response time that you're having? I mean, there's aberrations that happen, but are you comfortable with the response time we're having?
I mean, we look at it every year. Response time is one of those things that you're always chasing. You always want to be there a little bit quicker. I mean, obviously we're in a game of seconds, so we want to get there as quickly as possible. Traffic preemption was helpful. We did that several years ago. As you know, our apparatus are timed to the traffic lights to allow us a quicker response. But to say that I'm happy with response time, I mean, again, we're always striving to get better. We're always looking at those key points within our jurisdiction that are friction points. How can we get there better? How can we have workplace controls that allow them to get to the truck faster, that get us to call quicker? So that's going to be something that we're always chasing to try to get better at.
Well, let me stay with that question. One of the things when we were looking at safety of our roads and response time, the town put in place rapid response vehicles. And I've asked this question repeatedly. I want to make sure we're taking it's saved lives, having those rapid response vehicles out in the roadways station where there's the most accidents, etc. We have, I believe, 2 now. And are we in the need at this point for another rapid response vehicle with qualified person that has first responder capabilities to address those issues, or are we okay with the 2? Not okay. I want us to be exemplary. To
Now,
Jake's point.
Are you speaking about the police?
Well, the police,
Police
yeah,
vehicles.
the police,
Yeah.
but I think y'all come almost immediately too. But the rapid response, I guess that's a question for Chief Arnold.
Yeah. Now I can say, as far as our collaboration, I mean, they can get there quicker. They can assess the scene. They can say, okay, we have this many potential patients. It could affect our response as far as increasing or decreasing. But as far as the number, I can let Chief Arnold speak to that.
That'd be a good one, because what I think y'all have done is stationed them already in the day where you can have the most accidents. So you logically are on site, which I know in the case of a friend of mine, it saved his dad's life. And so I think it shows that it was worth the investment. So, Chief Arnold.
So, yes, sir. We deploy those based off of crash data. And to answer your question, is 2 enough? Again, as part of a workload study and recommendations, there will be a recommendation. I would like to see a couple more because I do think they are very valuable. And the truck itself is valuable. We've had police officers drive those things and use them. We had a deputy chief drive one on Saturday or Sunday for a assembly on the bridge. They're excellent vehicles for managing traffic. So I would definitely, as part of the workload study, include the CSOs. This is part of the reason we've looked at the CSO pay, is because the CSOs are an invaluable tool to us. They are workforce multiplier for the sworn positions, because they can handle a lot of stuff that doesn't require an officer, which frees up the officer to do other enforcement activities. So it's an integral part. Earlier, I mentioned having the right combination of civilian and sworn to maximize service delivery, and that's what I'm talking about. So happy to include that in a recommendation.
So that'd be perfect. As far as the CSO having a different pay, if they're driving a rapid response vehicle and they're certified to be a first responder or greater, you would probably think that person would have a different pay within a CSO than someone that was in a different setting.
That's my thought process, and that's why I worked with HR and discussed this with that position.
Okay, thank you.
But those rapid response are not aren't have nothing to do with fire response. Those
No.
are the right.
Well,
Yeah.
we work together on it almost every single collision.
Right.
So
But that's on collisions. This isn't like a house fire or
right,
No, but-
CSO
Yeah.
trucks aren't going to come unless we need to reroute traffic for them,
I will
and
state
then
a
they're a
couple.
valuable part of that.
I will state a couple of things. Like when I did my ride around, I mean, police almost need an assistant with them. They have to, I get these calls. I always see the police sitting in a parking lot. I'm like, well, number one, they're like this on their computer. They have to write the reports that have to be done after any incident. Takes so much time, and I know we talked about AI hopefully helping that out, right? Right. Or they need a personal assistant to drive in the car with them, because half of their time is having to write reports, and I'll say CYA. I didn't say it. You know what I mean? And they have to have all that documentation, and it's important. But that's what's happened. That's what's happened with fire. That's what's happened with police. There's so much that they have to actually handle. Okay, little break. They're saying we need a dance party break, I guess. You're good. You're good. You're good. So, but even with EMS, with fire, I don't know, and I'm going to use the word lucky, but it's not lucky. It's good leadership. When you go to other municipalities, we got EMTs showing up. I've been at other municipalities, and I've seen a person lay on a soccer field for 40 minutes because we're waiting on the county paramedics to show up, and this other municipality has fire, and they have fire. They don't have an EMT on every squad, but I believe you do. I don't know if
Yes, sir. 8 of our 10 frontline apparatus have paramedic level capability, which is the exact same thing that Charleston County EMS provides. All the same
Right.
medication, same
we just
protocols.
can't transport.
That's correct. So we have been an industry leader in that, in the paramedic capability for decades at this point.
which is
Um,
what's so important that we give
It's very
higher
important.
pay
I
for
mean, as you know,
education.
that's 60+% of our call volume. So being very proficient at that, being able to provide that same level of capability while we wait on a transport unit, I think is crucial. But you're starting to see other jurisdictions kind of follow our lead with that, and delve into the paramedic world. But we're definitely been an industry leader for years in that.
All right, thank you. And what about, Chief, on 4 per engine? Is that a number that you need to get to?
As Chief Arnold recommended, that is an FPA standard, a consensus standard, not statutory. But we are seeing stuff coming out of OSHA now where they're pulling in the consensus standard, NFPA being one of those. So we don't know on a federal level where the law will land. But as a general goal, yes, we would like to get to minimum 4 per day. Now, we do staff at 4 or 5 per day, but with vacations, overtime, sick leave, births of babies, all of those things, we do allow to drop down to a minimum of 3. But that is in our strat plan of eventually getting to 4 minimum per day per apparatus.
We got some work to do. Well, thank you, gentlemen. You guys good? Any questions? Questions? Okay. Now you guys
I do have a question.
go for it.
It always comes down to money. So you've done some studies that it's $6 million plus 25% to bring in all pay grades. How do we pay for it? And so I think it's important, just as we study it, to understand, not today, but understand the ways that's paid for, the way that's scaled, in order to achieve that we have the best fire, the best police, because that's certainly what we want. Chief Arnold has been doing a great job for 30 years, Chief Ritchie before, and he must have been doing a good job because he voted to be sheriff. So I think we really have to continue to be a beacon for the community as we are with the EMS. And so, but we need to be fiscally responsible too, and know how we would think about paying for it.
Well, we have a special council meeting coming up on Monday where millage rates are going to be discussed, and this is going to take. Can we go back to that slide, the big money slide, the real, where it's really at? What is a millage rate bring in the town of Mount Pleasant?
Well, we did have reassessment, as you know.
Right.
The value of 1 mil comes in about $1.5 million.
1.5, and 1 mil cost a property owner of I'm guessing you use a number like 500,000 or something like that. Or?
So that has gone up, no surprise, to $700,000. And 1 mil, based on our latest calculations, will cost an owner of that average value home $28 per mil.
So $700,000 home is our average home in the town of Mount Pleasant.
Tax assessed.
Tax assessed,
Yep.
Right.
Right.
The TikTok one's $850 or something like
And
that.
if you
but,
raised that property's taxes by 1 mil, it would add $28 to that property owner's tax bill.
so you're talking about, and this is not in our budget.
Correct.
And
That's
so
correct.
you're talking about $42 to the public safety of our citizens per year per $700,000 home.
Well,
At one
It
point.
depends
Oh no,
on-
I'm sorry.
Right.
No, 28 because it's 1.5. It used to be 1.1. I'm sorry, it has gone up. I apologize.
That's right.
You just said that. I'm sorry. So $28 for $700,000 home. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's important to know that. It's good work. Very energetic. Good job. I know you brought somebody with you. She did a good job too. Is she with you as well or no? I thought, or did you guys just walk in together? Oh, you guys. You're all jazzed up. Yeah. Thank you for doing the work. Yes. Well, you needed to be thanked too. You didn't get a moment in the spotlight. So thank you behind the scenes. Thank you for doing the work. Yeah. Do you have anything? Have a motion to?
No, I mean, I think a lot of the discussion will happen. Sorry. I think a lot of the discussion will happen Monday, Tuesday? When is that?
Monday is the 9:30 a.m.
With the required rollback from the 5-year reassessment plus, deciding what we want to do, what direction we want to go in.
Do you need a motion to move this to the Monday meeting, or is this going to be discussed? I know the agenda's out already, but,
If you would like to discuss it Monday, it does not need a motion here.
okay.
You could just, if you wanted to, sir, you could just perhaps brief council at that time if you're interested in sharing what came out of HR committee as council is deliberating over the new tax rate.
Well, what is coming out of committee? What do you guys think about this?
Well, so my thought.
Yeah, go for it. Oh, let me do it.
So
Mr. Rambo.
thank you. So, as soon as I get used to Howard being right there, he is real.
That was a nod to that. That was a nod.
So my thoughts would be, at the very minimum, we're going, in my opinion, at the very minimum, we will accept this recommendation for the employee wage study. But then my thoughts would be that we go a step further in our police and fire pay, as well as discuss. I know the fire, it's in some of the plans to add some positions. I do feel like we should add some to the police force, some positions to the police force. So I don't know that I want to make a recommendation to accept this study, because to me that shows that, like, that's what HR committee is recommending, is just accepting this study. But I think we should go a little bit further than that, and so that's really just a discussion for full council, honestly, at that point.
And I think we asked for some supplemental information, which may or may not be available in such short order, but to the extent we can, that gives us a total picture. And I always think it's important to look at all positions. You know, if I've got somebody in cybersecurity and they're underpaid, or we can't get the right people, I sort of want them to be taken care of. And there's other positions, where 72 were mentioned. And so I think it's important to look at comprehensively fire and police, but also some of these other positions.
We have the full Excel sheet, or we have the full sheet of every position that's in here. And everybody's been given that via email, or can be given that via email.
No, it's an ever-changing thing with people leaving the town and coming
Oh,
on the town.
no, I guess what I'm saying is, do you like we've got a blanket number here of 335. Do you have every position with every recommendation
Like
from
the
this
raw-
report that you can,
The raw data.
the raw data that you can send us? Yes,
Positions would be affected and what that amount consists of.
yes, that would be great to have, and I think we need that. And does anybody need any other data? I mean, I agree with Chief Arnold. You might just say we want where are we at? 1.7 per thousand. We might want 2 per thousand, but it's a dance, right? Is it this position? What do we need? So we're not going to set that, but I definitely think with the way in which the world is going, and the ability to come into the town of Mount Pleasant and try to do what criminals do, we want to make sure that we've got the proper amount. We've got so much going on, so many tourists. There's so much going on. You guys do a great job with what you have, but we need to know if you need more, and it's okay. It's okay to tell us that. It's okay to tell me, but I might not be here in another month. I don't know. We'll let the citizens decide that. So I might get fired. We don't know. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I think we got to give as much data. Do you guys need anything from any of them? Can we get them to work this? Can we give them so much work we make them work this weekend? You need any data by Monday for the meeting that you can think of? Everything we talked about? Jake, do you have any additional data you'd like to
I feel like everything was answered.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's great. If we could get those.
I have everything I need.
We can get the raw data emailed to all of council. That'd be great. All these presentations. I know you've emailed some stuff already.
Sure.
I'm
Glad to.
feeling good. Thank you for all this work. And with that, if nobody has anything else, thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you, guys.